Hello and welcome to The Reset, a mental health podcast without all the bollocks. I'm Sam Delaney. My guest this week is the broadcaster, singer, writer and sober coach Janey Lee Grace. Janey sang with huge acts in the 80s, including Wham. Then she had her own big music success in the 90s with bands like Cola Boy, before becoming a much-loved broadcaster on Radio 2, most notably as long-term co-host on Steve Wright in the afternoon. She's also become one of the biggest and best voices on sobriety and recovery in the UK, with her own brilliant alcohol-free life podcast, which I guested on last year, and her excellent community, The Sober Club. Janey is one of the best talkers on this stuff, so if you've ever been in the least bit sober curious, have a listen to this chat. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. Janey, welcome to The Reset.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to have you. Janey, I've been a big fan of all of your broadcasting work for many years, and it was a pleasure to come on your podcast last year when I was promoting my book. And
yeah, that was fun.
And your podcast is absolutely thriving. But I'm really keen today to get more of your own personal story, because you speak to so many other people about their stories. You got sober in 2018 after a few attempts in the past, or like tryouts in the past, let's say. Tell us about that. What brought you to that point in your life?
Yeah, so I mean, I was one of those people I never had a rock bottom moment. So for me, it was always just drinking too much, which is not quite the same as other people thinking you, in inverted commas, have a problem. Yes. The expression is high bottomed, oh, how I wish. But I was basically drinking pretty much every day. And my drinking ramped up when my kids were young, which is very often the case, actually, in the kind of mummy wine culture thing. Yeah. But for many years, I don't think I saw it as any kind of a problem. It's just what everybody did. I was kind of queen of holistic living, really, really focused on eating well and good supplements and natural skincare and cleaning your home without chemicals, and literally queen of holistic living. And yet stepping around this huge elephant in the room that was alcohol. But, I suppose if you'd have asked me at that time, I would have just said, well, my website is called Imperfectly Natural. And so, yes, I'm imperfect, and that's my little vice, and everyone does it, don't they? And it's fine, isn't it? That would have been my answer. And I really saw the wine as my self-care, saw it as my treat, if you like, after a busy day working or with the kids, And then as time went on, I started to notice that I would be waking up at 3 a.m. That was the thing that really started to become irritating. So I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and there'd be a little voice, kind of saying, what the hell are you doing? Just stop it. This is, what's going on? The ceiling's spinning. What's going on? It's a bloody Tuesday and you've had far too much to drink again. And in those kind of early hours, I would kind of make a little deal with myself and with God and say, I won't ever drink again. I mean, I was a relatively successful, relatively strong person. Surely it can't be that hard. Just make a decision, stop, right? So I'd make this decision at 3 a.m. And then literally by 6 o'clock the next night, the wine witch would be in my ear and it would all start again. And so this went on for a long time. And I did have periods where I stopped. So I went on a juice retreat and stopped. I obviously didn't drink during that. And then I came home, didn't drink for possibly about 5 months. And then I had other breaks from alcohol where I, just chose not to drink. And I felt so much better, but I kept going back to it. But I just knew that I knew it was the key. And yet I didn't know how to address it, because I think one of them, I'm sure we'll get into this, but I think one of the main reasons why I couldn't crack this thing was because, well, number one, I didn't know anyone else like me. I wasn't aware of anyone else who was in the same situation. I was aware that there are people who go to AA meetings and go to rehab, and that absolutely was not me. I didn't fit that pattern at all. And then I knew plenty of people who drank, in inverted commas, socially and seemed completely fine. And that, I of course, that may not have been the case. I suspect they were probably also waking up at 3 a.m., but none of us discussed it. So I didn't know it was a thing, what we now call grey area drinkers. It's somewhere on that spectrum. I didn't know it was a thing. And that's what was keeping me stuck. I thought I was the only person who felt this way. And on the few occasions when I reached out to, if I went to the GP I remember going to the GP for a vitamin D test once, and she was really nice and helpful. And so on the way out, I did that doorknob thing and sort of said, oh, by the way, there is something else. I'm actually a bit worried about my drinking. And of course, she sort of looked at me and said, well, you look fine. How much are you drinking? And then obviously I lied and said, oh, well, 2-3 glasses a night. And she just said, perfectly normal. You just have an alcohol-free day, like I hadn't thought of that, right? So that kept me stuck for another few years. So this was the pattern that I was getting into. Sorry, it's a very long answer.
No, it's a really good answer, and there's so much there that's familiar to me as well. I wonder if you ever, I think that I was in a similar situation for a lot of my years of drinking, and sometimes I would say to peers, like, oh, I think that I might be drinking too much. Or there was a point at which my wife started to say, look, you're drinking a bit much. And because you just going back to you say everyone seems to do it. If ever I said that to a mate, they'd go, no, what are you talking about? You don't drink too much. What are you talking about? Because it was so normalized. And it's the same reason probably I had a similar experience at the GPs. They said, you put on a lot of weight since we last weighed you. Why is that? And I said, well, it might be that I'm drinking so heavily. And they just said, well, you should cut down on that then.
Yeah, exactly.
You sort of like cry for help. But the grey area drinking is something that you're doing a lot of work around, and that is so very important, because we hear the phrase in recovery a lot about the gift of desperation, which is what gets a lot of people into recovery. But there's so many like you, like I was, so many people, and it's a big area, isn't it, that we need to sort of raise more awareness of for people.
Yeah, it really is. I personally, I have a real issue with sticking with that desperation model, as it were, because I'm really aware that for many people, they need to stop. And stopping needs to, they need to be jolted, if you like, into recognizing all the logic. We know that the knowing the logic around alcohol is absolutely key. It's a huge, there's so much cognitive dissonance because we're told it's what everyone does. We're told 14 units a week, which of course no one sticks to anyway, is okay. There's so much BS in the media about actually you live longer if you drink moderately. I mean, what in God's earth? What are those? Seriously, I can't get my head around. Well, I can. It's clearly the alcohol companies are funding all this BS. There was one the other day about dementia, and really, if once you're 65, you should really stop drinking. No, why would I wait till I've got all of those issues? So I completely understand that we need the logic around alcohol. We need the shock, if you like, to know that alcohol is killing us. We need to know that when you're drinking alcohol, you're self-harming. Let's be really clear about it. It's toxic. You're self-harming. Okay, but once you've got that logic and you've shaken yourself, or someone else has shaken you into realizing this has to stop, you need to get away from this incredibly harmful substance that is doing you no good, zero benefits. Forget being great at socializing. No, that's despite the alcohol. If you're a good dancer or you're a good friend and a dancer despite the alcohol, not because of it. So once you've shaken yourself into the recognition that this needs doing, yes, you got a hard bit to get through. I acquiesce that completely. But after that, for me, it's all about the motivation and looking forward for the solution. So to me, I don't buy into the whole thing of you're an alcoholic when you've been sober for 35 years. I do not accept that. I don't accept that I have to keep hanging on and gritting my teeth for one more day. I genuinely believe you can be free. You can be free from this. And so that's my different spin on it, if you like, and the spin that most people who would consider themselves grey area drinkers, that's what helps them get free. Because it's not a case of, I can't drink because there's something wrong with me, so I can't drink. And those lucky people that can just have one. How lovely is that? No, we're the lucky ones.
Well, it's about I love the way you speak about, it's the positivity of a sober life. And the big thing for me was when I understood that you weren't giving something up when you stopped drinking. You were actually, and most people who I would speak to who are grey area drinkers would probably say to me, but the thing is is that, yes, I know it might be bad for my health, but I don't care because I'd rather enjoy my life. And so they're still hooked on this idea that enjoyment of life is almost only possible if you embellish it with alcohol. So, you do so much, sobriety rocks, such a great phrase, to sort of alert people. Is that central really to your ethos? Is just alerting people rather than to the sacrifice of giving up alcohol, but to the positivities? And what were the things that you discovered first when you first got sober?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I never let anybody use the phrase giving up. I think it's a really dangerous phrase because it tells your unconscious mind that you're being deprived and you're missing out on something and you're having to give up something that everyone else is enjoying. Absolute nonsense. Focus only on what you're gaining. So change the phrase, use the phrase quitting or ditching the booze or stopping alcohol, whatever you like, but never use the phrase give up. So that's the number one top tip, which really helps you. If you literally focus, if you commit to focusing only on what you're gaining. And anything difficult is worth doing. So yeah, you might have a few days where, it's even a few weeks where you feel completely out of sorts, completely chaotic, because you've been doing this thing for years and everything is shifting. Your brain chemistry is shifting, your mindset is shifting. It's hard, but once you're through that, if you keep focusing on the positives, you really have got everything to gain. So yeah, for me, once I'd got through that hard bit, I was able to start to notice all kinds of things that I could never have imagined. And this is the piece where, I wish somebody could come up with a better phrase, right? The phrase is really crap, right? The phrase is, it's the gift that keeps on giving. What a horrible naff phrase, right? If anyone can come up with a better one, I'll give you a nice prize. Okay. But I can't think of anything else that means the same thing. But that's the reality. So literally, things start to get better when you stop drinking and you focus on what you're gaining. Things get better. Now, there are lots of things that we would expect to get better. So your skin gets clearer, you might lose a bit of bloat, you might drop a few pounds. Not necessarily straight away, by the way. If weight is a thing for you, that might take a lot longer, but something will adjust. Any niggling health conditions, little things that you've had going on for ages, sometimes miraculously stop. They definitely don't get any worse, put it that way, right? They don't get any worse. Suddenly you're able to recognize, oh, hold on a minute, maybe I need to look after this body. Perhaps I will book the dental appointment that I haven't had for 4 years because I was too busy drinking or whatever. So you start to take a bit more care of yourself. You definitely have more clarity and more awareness of what's going on. Now, the flip side to that, of course, is that you've got to feel all the feels, right? Yeah. So you might feel a bit emotional, might have a bit of an emotional roller coaster to start. But that's because all of our bloody adult years have been through the lens of booze. It's scary when you think about it. Yeah. All of our emotional, if you like, big stuff that's happened to us emotionally has all been covered up by booze. Every single last important thing. Whether it's meeting your first love, whether it's having sex for the first time, getting married, going on a holiday, everything is done through the lens of booze. Every funeral you go to, everything, every play date, in my case, for the kids. So because of that, when you're doing things without booze, you've got to actually notice your feelings. And that's tough. It's like, what is this new sensation? I'm going to have to sit with this, right? So yes, it's weird to start with. But in addition to those kind of benefits that everyone expects, clearer eyes, better skin, more energy, more clarity, being much more present, if you're a parent, oh my God, the difference is huge, absolutely huge. It's the best parenting hack ever because you're no longer on the back foot. You can actually take your place as a parent with compassion and being a decent human being and set boundaries without being a total arse, because you're not on the back foot wondering what it was you said yesterday, for having forgotten what you what boundaries you set yesterday. So it makes you much more present. But then in addition to those things, there are other things that I couldn't have imagined, like having a different kind of sense of purpose. So suddenly you start to become interested in things that you never thought you would be interested in. You start to notice little things in life that bring you back to balance and give you joy. It sounds really twee and ridiculous, but actually it's so freeing not to have to be searching for the dopamine the whole time. You know, you can actually be content with little things. Makes you a much calmer, nicer person. And then, of course, the big one is this sense of self-love and self-esteem. Now, again, it sounds really woo-woo, but that's what's behind most people's drinking or whatever their habits are. What lies behind them usually is a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-care.
Yeah.
You know, we can call it whatever we like, but that's usually what it is. Whether that's from trauma, you know, trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t, whether it's the limiting beliefs, the stories you tell yourself. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and we don't necessarily need to dig into them all. You know, we don't need to go and have years and years of counselling. It's enough actually to accept, okay, I wasn't really very comfortable with who I was. Well, no wonder you were pouring toxic liquid in it. Right? When you actually become more aware of who you really are, you can actually start to like yourself. And that's absolutely huge. And I personally, I think it's really hard to do that under the lens of booze. So there are some things that start to come into place that just so many different aspects of your life change when you stop drinking. And I don't know anyone who preferred themselves drunk.
No, nor do I. And it, you know, someone said to me, when I was first sober, that a therapist said to me, you know, when did you start drinking? And to get drunk. And I said, probably about 12 in the park. And I was 40 when I quit. And she said, well, in many ways, you stopped emotionally maturing.
Exactly that.
And that's exactly what I think you've just verbalized so powerfully.
Exactly that.
And it's true. But as you do, I suppose it is difficult when you have to feel the feels, and the only way that a lot of us learned to face challenges, emotional challenges, was with, at least in part, with the crutch of alcohol. So how did you deal with that? Was it therapy? Was it, you know, how did you learn to sort of start dealing with all the stuff in the past? You just thought, oh, I'll have a drink and get through it that way.
Well, I already had an awful lot of stuff going on. So I was already working as a coach and using some different modalities. But since stopping drinking, it's made me even more interested in a lot of this work. So I now practice something called family constellations. I'm a practitioner. It's a massive topic. I mean, we can't get into it. It's too big, but you just have to trust me. It's unbelievable. It is so powerful. You can do one session of family constellations. It's a shame it's called family constellations. It's systemic constellations, but it always tracks back to usually tracks back to your family of origin or your place of birth or your something way back in the past. It might be inherited stuff. But when you do that kind of work, it's unbelievably powerful. So that was one thing that helped me tremendously. But in terms of right at the very beginning, you know, what I now do when I work with clients, in a way, I'm glad that I didn't have any support at the beginning. I didn't know anyone else. I didn't have any support. I must have had just enough to get me through those early weeks where I was kind of very chaotic and raw and not knowing what the hell was going on, and something clicked into gear and I suddenly remembered my own stuff. And so I'm now, but in a way I'm glad, because it means that I know what people go through, but now I'm able to kind of support people who are in the early stages and they can make it much easier than I did. So to cut to the quick, one of the pieces that makes the most difference that most people leave out is the right nutrition.
Right.
If you don't have the right nutrition in the early weeks of stopping drinking, the likelihood of you relapsing, in inverted commas, hate that word, is really high. And it's because you can only go so far with your mindset and with your thinking. Some of it is physiological. So once the alcohol has left your body, you know, even if you've been drinking a lot, it's not a physical craving for alcohol. It's just a thought. But nevertheless, there's a physiological response. And if your brain chemistry is all out of whack, the serotonin, the dopamine, the GABA, it's almost like your body is going, what the hell is going on? Where is my dopamine? I've had a really crap day. I've just had a really annoying phone call with my mother or whatever. You know, the kids are driving me insane. You know, I've got a bit of a cold coming on. Where is the dopamine? And normally you would just reach for the glass. That's the easy fix, right? So you've got to find another way. So one of the best ways is to help rebalance that brain chemistry and do it really simply through proper nutrition. The good news is, this isn't anything fancy, but it's real food and plenty of it at the right times. So this is not the time to stop eating. But you'll be amazed how many people say to me, "Oh, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go off the booze for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and I'm hoping I might lose a few pounds. So I'm going to do the 5-2 diet as well." Oh, excuse me, no, definitely not. This is the time to eat really well, proper food, no crappy, just no processed food, just real food. And for some people, that's a huge change. But the difference. I'm
just thinking about the amount of sugar that I ate in the first few weeks, probably the first year of sobriety. I gained weight in my first year of sobriety.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
I expected to shed it, and I subsequently found out that it was common. Because
it is very common, yeah.
I didn't even eat many sweets or chocolate bars before I got sober. First year, and that couldn't obviously putting on weight's not nice, but looking back, I mean, your body was going. My body was going through a huge amount of change.
Exactly. It's a typical
I was fueling it with the worst stuff. So yeah,
exactly.
I'm guessing that's very.
So it's very common, and on the one hand, for people who get a sugar head, it's completely understandable, and to a certain extent, it's you can work with that. It's not the right time to be ditching every bit of sugar as well. That's not going to be possible. So you do have to accept to a certain extent that you're gonna crave, in inverted commas, more sugar. But there are ways of doing that which are much more healthy. So number one, if you're eating really well, I mean literally I'm talking old-fashioned eating, like 3 meals a day, proper meals, protein with every meal. And I really mean protein with every meal. So if somebody says, "Oh, you'd be really proud of me, I had a vegetable soup for lunch with sourdough bread." Well, that's a fabulous lunch, but there ain't no protein. Right? If someone says, "Oh, you'll be proud of me. Oh, I had some berries and whatever, granola at breakfast." Great, but have an egg, right?
Yeah.
You need real food, protein with every meal, really good fats, so that you feel satiated, so that your body has literally got enough. So that the idea of donuts and Haribos and God knows what afterwards, it's like, oh God, well I'm too full really to have that crap. And then when you do need sugar, because you do, that's just a reality, then, cut yourself a little bit of slack, but wherever you can, just do some swaps. Have some dark chocolate and nuts and put some dates in the freezer. That's a really good tip because they taste like truffles when they've been in the freezer. Dates with peanut butter or something. There's in the Sober Club, I've got so many videos on this kind of thing. So there are sugar swaps you can do to make that easier for you. The other amazing tip in the early weeks is to do fresh juicing. So if you've got a juicer, just grab a cheap juicer and make a green juice. Okay, if you've really got a sweet tooth, stick some pineapple or something in. It'll disguise the taste of the greens, but have a green juice, and I swear to God, nobody could drink alcohol after a green juice. Right. So you've got a double whammy there. You've got all the goodness straight to your cells, and it'll take away the craving completely.
It's true that when in the early days of sobriety, sometimes when I got through the initial, sort of weeks of adjusting, you can accidentally take the view that, oh, wow, this is incredible. I can do anything. And then it really rang a bell when you said that, like suddenly you're like, oh, I'm going to go on a diet or I'm going to start training for a marathon. And that can be dangerous, can't it? Is that a common thing? Like you almost start to think, what am I going to do with all this excess energy and time I've got? And you can burn yourself out rather than just focus on looking after yourself, nurturing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a thing that people sometimes, if you're the kind of person that is very driven and you like challenges and, you like to push yourself and you like to do the next thing and tick that one off, there is a bit of a danger that people can kind of go, oh, I've cracked that one now. So, so I can go back to drinking. That happens to some people. And then, as you say, to other people, it's like, well, I've got all this energy now, I can do whatever I like, and then they can burn themselves out very quickly. It can happen. I mean, I think the trick is you need a balance. So I've got Sober Club members who started running when they stopped drinking, and it became just something they absolutely loved. And a couple of them did run the marathon recently. I'm just mega impressed. Yeah. But they factored it into their life. They've made it work for them. I've got other clients who found that in the early weeks of sobriety, it shone a light on the fact that they had too much time. because it's incredible how much time drinking takes up, right? And that's a real interesting thing when you recognize, oh my goodness, I haven't actually got enough in my life. That can be a real difficult one for some people. It's like, oh God, I must be so boring. I haven't got anything going on.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to just come back to this self-care piece and ask yourself, well, what do I enjoy doing? What could I bring into my life that brings me joy for 10, 15 minutes? It might be some kind of creative thing you used to do when you were a kid, or it doesn't matter what it is, but do something. Do something for 10 or 15 minutes. See if there's a hobby that you want to pick up, or you know, even if it comes back to the self-care piece until you find your, I always call it, it's a bit like you've got to kind of fit into a new identity. It is a new identity. You're becoming who you really are. But, you know, like in your case, you didn't quite know who that was because you start pouring booze on it at 12. So you start to discover who you really are, and you step into your new sober identity. And as long as you just become open and curious to what that's going to be, the right things will come your way.
What's your take on, you know, your social life and still going to the same places and socializing with the same people who used to be part of your drinking life? What's your advice on that?
I think that really varies for everybody. So some people find that they can stop drinking and literally continue with pretty much the same group of friends doing the same stuff, but they just switch what's in their hand from an alcoholic drink to an alcohol-free drink. Some people get along just fine with that. Most people find that old lifestyle doesn't serve them anymore. Number one, because drunk people are really boring. And, you know, once you stop drinking and then you rock up to something with friends, oh God, after a few drinks, you want to shake them. So, excuse me, you've told me that now 5 times. It was boring the first time. You've told me 5 times. But of course you can't say that. You find that you want to leave earlier because, you know, what is the point of sticking around just because people are drunk? It's horrible. You got stuff to do and things to get up for, you know, so you start to have a different perspective on your life. So the reality is, some relationships will fall away. It's just the reality. And people get really scared of this. They get terrified of, oh God, what will I do? How will I socialize? My tip is actually don't try and second guess it. Don't worry about it. Make it in the early weeks, make a decision. Do you want to go out or don't you? And you know what? This lovely phrase, no is a complete sentence. So if you want to hole up at home, you hole up at home. It's only up to you to decide. It's nobody else's business what you do in the first few weeks while you're literally getting well. And this is the most important thing you will ever do for your health and well-being. So whether or not you rock up to some work party really does not matter. It's neither here nor there. But if you are going to go out to somewhere you would have gone before, you know, with the same kind of people, then, I mean, my tips are to give them a heads up that you're not drinking, so it's not such a shock in inverted commas. So drop them a text or whatever, and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm not drinking." It's a really good idea to give a reason in a couple of words. You can lie. You can say, you know, I'm on antibiotics, I'm driving, I'm pregnant. That one work for you. Or you can tell the truth. You can say, I'm feeling so much less anxious. Now that's a fantastic one, because which of your friends is going to go, oh, you boring sod, I preferred you when you were anxious, right? They're probably not going to say that. So you give them a heads up, and then when you get there to wherever you're going, and there will be people who just go, oh, what's all that BS? You know, here's your usual, or would you like your usual? And the trick is to know exactly what you're going to drink. So ring the venue ahead, know what they've got. So you know exactly what you're going to drink. So as you arrive at the bar, whatever anyone says or doesn't say, I'd love a drink, thank you. I'll have a alcohol-free beer. I'll have a sparkling water with a slice of lemon in it. I'll have whatever it is. So you ask for the drink you want rather than having to go, oh, what have you got? That's like, oh, I'm not quite. By the time you've done all that, the sober shamer next to you will be saying, don't be so goddamn ridiculous, have your usual. And then it gets awkward. So you get the drink you want to get, and then you change the subject. Because most people are really happy when they're talking about themselves, and they don't notice after, you know, the first few moments, really. One of the big problems with this is that a lot of us are people pleasers. So we know full well when we don't want to drink. We've made that decision. We don't want to drink. We're very happy to rock up to the whatever it is and have a sparkling water and go home and have an early night. We're good about it. But we get worried about other people. We don't want them to feel bad, which is utterly crazy. Because why should it matter to someone else what I'm putting in my mouth?
We drink our way through so many experiences that in sobriety realize were boring and quite shit all along.
Totally.
Don't we? Like, there's so many things that I used to go along to that I kind of thought were all right, and then as soon as I got sober I thought, oh, they're really boring. I had to get drunk to endure that, didn't I?
Yeah. And it's the same with the friends. There are a lot of people that I look back and I think, I really only hung out with that person because we could drink each other under the table. We had nothing in common. The really good thing about this, and lots of people have told me that this is true, so I know it's not just my own experience, but what happens is if you don't agonize over it too much, if you just kind of go with the flow, focus on yourself. This is the time for, self-care isn't selfish. It's really essential. So you just focus on yourself, all the exciting things that are going to be coming to you. And then you just watch as the relationships shift and shape a little bit. So what I've found, and lots of other people I know, is that those people that are going to come along with you, as it were, are going to grow with you, will naturally grow with you. That doesn't mean they'll necessarily stop drinking. They might not, but they'll be supportive of what you do and respectful. So they'll grow with you. And those that aren't will naturally fall away, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to write them a letter. You don't have to apologize. You don't have to phone them up. They naturally fall away. You just never hear from them again. And that's fine.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Janey, I've got to say, though, I look at your life, your career. It's been amazing, right? And I was just thinking before we spoke to her, I thought, okay, so you worked with Wham, right? You were a dancer with Wham. Singer, sorry. You were the most, that was the most fun pop band ever.
Yeah, it was.
You were a voice, a big part of, I think, the funnest radio show ever, Steve Wright in the Afternoon, right?
Yeah.
You've done so many fun things in your life. And I thought, when you've lived a life full of that much excitement and fun and achievement, it must be a really big fear, the fear of boredom. And obviously you're here today and we know full well from everything you've said, you've found that that's not the case at all. But it was you led a life that I suppose, from the outside looking in, it was a fast and exciting and high achieving and relentlessly fun life. So did that make you think, if I slow down or stop or jump off this train, it's going to all come crashing down around me?
Do you mean... Just rephrase that. Do you mean how is that linked to the alcohol question? If it does,
well, I mean, when you gave up alcohol.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I'm not saying alcohol was like sort of integral to all of those experiences. I'm sure it wasn't. Because you're very good at all of the work you've done. But you from a young age, it seems to me like you were living a non-stop exciting life, and that when you give up alcohol, you think, oh, what if I can't? What if that just makes life boring? What if I can't cope?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it shines a light on the fact that we all have this perception that drinking alcohol is fun, right? We have the perception that if we're seeking fun, in inverted commas, or dopamine, or wanting to be happy or socialize, alcohol does it. But it's not true. The emperor's not wearing any clothes. Are you too young to know that story, or? Do you know that story?
I know the
the story. Literally, the emperor is not wearing any clothes. It's just that we've all been told that alcohol is the answer. We've all been told we can't possibly have fun at an event without alcohol, from celebrations to commiserations. You need alcohol. It's a social glue. But it's not true. In fact, the opposite is true. It's a depressant. It's a depressant. So when you take it away, when you finally open your eyes and you take it away, yes, you might realize that, okay, I haven't got as much fun in my life now. Now I'm not doing Steve's show. You're absolutely right. It was a huge part of my life where I had fun every single time I went into that show, because we had such a laugh. I've written a book, actually. It comes out in October. We'll have to have another chat.
Yeah.
In which you'll see that there was an awful lot of downtime where I wasn't having fun. But anyway, but yes, I don't have as much, in inverted commas, fun in my life. But I absolutely recognise that drinking alcohol would literally be pouring fuel on a fire. If I was feeling down and depressed and anxious, pouring alcohol on it simply exacerbates it. Not enough people talk about this. It really drives me insane. The amount I've got so many clients, a lot of women particularly, will rock up to GPs and they'll say, oh, I've got, hot flushes. I'm anxious. I'm not sleeping well. Terrible mood swings. Really, I've got huge anxiety. My kid's got a problem in school or a problem in a relationship, whatever it is. And they'll be prescribed antidepressants, HRT, sometimes both, right? And not asked about their drinking. And these women are downing a bottle of wine a night.
Yeah.
And what the hell is that even about? Crazy.
GPs drink, not all of them. I'm not casting aspersions, but sometimes you'll speak to someone, yes, they're GP and they're medically trained, but we're talking about something that's ingrained culturally and socially here.
Totally.
And they're part of that. We all know what medical students are like. And,
exactly.
And a lot of GPs are absolutely not ready to say that if you're drinking a few glasses of wine a night, then that's a problem, because that's exactly what they're doing. And, and that's an issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely an issue. But if someone is rocking up with anxiety or with something linked to poor mental health, they should know that you need to take out alcohol from the equation first. So let's see where we are when you take alcohol out, because, and you're absolutely right. They are drinking, and I'm not expecting the GP to say, oh, this is what you need to do. But what they could have done for me when I said, actually, I'm worried about my drinking. If I was brave enough to share that I was worried, what they should have said is, well, well done you for noticing. Let me signpost you to some resources, look at the Sober Club or whatever. That's what they needed to say. Not, oh, you're fine. This is where it all goes bad.
Yeah. Before I let you go, there was something that we actually chatted about over email, but I just wanted to ask you one question about it. It's something that I want to do a bigger story on soon, which is couples where one person is not drinking and one is, or one has the aspiration to cut down or quit and the other one does not. This is something I've seen. I was very lucky. My wife was she drank, but she was never she was very, very moderate drinker and could really take it or leave it. And in fact, when I stopped, she sort of welcomed that, because it was like less sort of things. So I realized how lucky I was, but I've also seen it the other way round. And it feels to me as if it's one of the toughest obstacles to overcome. I know you've worked with people in all sorts of different situations. Is this one you see come up, and how do you advise people to deal with it?
Yeah, I do see it all the time. And what happened to you is actually quite common,
right?
Thankfully. What can often happen is that one partner decides to stop drinking and the other partner is not a heavy drinker. They're literally a take it or leave it, and naturally a mindful drinker, as it were, without having to, focus on anything. And so when the one who's drinking too much stops, they kind of, it's like, oh wow, I can see now we don't need any, and so they stop as well. And that actually does happen a lot, thankfully, which really highlights the key thing, which is for you to get on with what you're doing anyway. You have to do this for you. So with women, for example, that I work with, I'll often say to them, if they're concerned because their husband is a big drinker, I'll often say to them, look, at least for these first few weeks, just you tell your husband you're doing a health thing, which is true, by the way, you are. And there's a whole load of stuff that is not going to involve them, but just ask for the support you need. So that might be that you're making slightly different meals, so hope that's all right. And by the way, you're not going to the pub Thursday night because you're not drinking alcohol for this period of time, and you'll be going out to yoga on a Friday morning or whatever the hell it is. So you literally tell them what you're doing, get on with it, and do it. It's your business, it's not theirs. The least you say in the early weeks to close family and friends, the better, actually. Because if you get into debates and arguments, it's really tricky. Because someone who's a big drinker will just try to persuade you back to drinking. They don't mean any harm, but they'll just be, oh, sweetie, you've had a hard day. Oh, God. But you're doing well, so just have one with me, And it's much better just to get on and do it. like you would any kind of health project that you're doing for you. You know, if you're training to run a marathon, you know, you don't have a discussion or an argument with your partner before you train. You just go and do your bloody training, right? You get on with it. So that's what I kind of recommend is get on with what you're doing with as least discussion as possible. But that can usually only take you so far, because there'll come a period of time, if it is a relationship where one person really does drink a lot, then there'll often come a period of time where that partner starts to feel like they've lost their drinking buddy, and might start to say, you know, oh, when are you going to stop this health kick you're on? When are you, you know, going to come back and have fun with me again? And it can be so distressing when people are, you know, get this stuff thrown at them. Oh, you're no fun anymore. One client actually said to me that her partner had said, "You're not fun anymore." I mean, what absolute BS, you know? Yeah. Clearly, you're shining a light on their behaviour. But when that happens, really, you know, this is the idea in an ideal world is that the stronger you get, you step more into who you really are. You become much better at setting boundaries. You become much more compassionate and kind. So you don't have to have alcohol-fueled big arguments. You know, you don't have to have big scenes. You can just very calmly share with your partner that this is what works for you. And you feel better, so much better. And your life is better without this toxic liquid. So you ain't going to be going back to it. And that's how it is. You can't try and change them. And sometimes they can grasp sight of that, and you can rub along together, and one person drinks and one person doesn't. And sometimes, unfortunately, it signals the end, and that's a terrible thing to have to say, but it's true. However, on the occasions I've seen that happen, I have seen it a few times, not many, I have to say, but I have seen it a couple of times. And when it's happened, the person who has decided, look, this isn't working for me anymore. I've outgrown this. I'm doing all kinds of other things now. I know who I am as a person. It's not enough for me just to sit drinking every night. I'm not that person anymore. What tends to happen is they're able to deal with a breakup, if there has to be one. They're able to deal with it in such a compassionate way, such an amicable way. It's incredible. One of my clients ended up having to do this. It had probably been on the cards for 20 years, if truth be told. But when she finally ended up having to do it, she literally it was as amicable as it could possibly be. They did a rubber stamp thing with the lawyers, and it cost 30 quid. Wow. And she said, you know, if I'd still been drinking, oh my God, we'd still be in litigation, and we'd probably be hundreds of thousands of quids down.
Yeah, yeah. Janey, it's such a pleasure speaking with you, and it is so sort of inspirational and educational too. I'm 9 years sober, but like I thought I knew a lot, but listening to you, it's just so enlightening. I've learned so much more, and people can find out even more and learn from all the brilliant stuff you're doing at Sober Club. I'll put all the links in the notes with this show. Also to the excellent alcohol-free pod as well, which is well worth a listen. Janey, thanks ever so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Can I come back on when I get my book, when my book comes out?
Absolutely.
And so chat about the Wham days.
So the book is like
it's a memoir. It's a memoir. It's called From Wham to Woo.
I tell you what, I'll be at the front. I would be at the front of the queue for the book anyway. Your life story takes in so many of my sort of favourite cultural moments.
Oh, good. Anyway, oh, yeah. There's a lot of 80s and 90s stuff in there. You're a little boy, for God's sake.
Oh my God! Yeah, I was a Wham obsessed little boy.
Were you? Yeah, how funny.
I loved your Cola.
And then in the 90s, were you into all the kind of rave stuff? Were you old enough for that?
Yeah, of course. Okay. And then you know, as I got older, I was listening to Steve Wright in the afternoon.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, I mean, your book, regardless of whether you're on my podcast or not, I'm buying that book for sure. Cool. I can't wait. And best of luck with it. Let's speak again nearer the time. And until then, thanks ever so much.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Bye-bye. That was the magnificent Janey Lee Grace. I've put links to the Sober Club and her podcast in the show notes. I can highly recommend them both. Thanks for listening. As always, please remember to subscribe to The Reset if you don't already at samdelaney.substack.com. That's it for this week, gang. Until next time, be lucky and don't let the dickheads get you down.